you think it's not irresponsible for the president of the United States, the person with the biggest megaphone in pretty much in the world, to say that there is voter fraud happening in California with no evidence to actually back up what he's saying? You don't think that's irresponsible?
I think there's evidence, and I don't think it's irresponsible.
But what evidence do you have?
Tyler Cohen faced off with MAGA commentator Katie Zachariah on CNN's Alex Michelson show, and things got intense fast. The debate was packed with heated exchanges as Katie pushed several familiar MAGA talking points that sparked major controversy. We're breaking down the biggest moments, fact-checking the claims, and sharing some key insights along the way. Stick around until the end, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you enjoy the content. Let's dive in.
Host of the No Lie with Tyler Cohen podcast. Welcome to you both. Good to have you back with us. Katie, are Democrats cheating?
Listen, in 2019, Tom Fitton with Judicial Watch sued Los Angeles County. And what did they find? Los Angeles County hadn't kicked anyone off their voter rolls for over 20 years. They had to kick off 1.5 million people off those voter rolls, 1.5 million. And in the last 7 years since that happened, 400,000+ people have fled Los Angeles. So we're relying on this faulty system that never kicked people off the voter rolls to begin with to somehow now start doing it. And look, the electoral system is broken if you can't have the count in a week.
How do those people, but the reason that the system is slow is because of signature verification to go through all of that to make sure that there isn't fraud or anything like that. How are those people supposed to get through the system?
Well, listen, you could have voter ID and same-day voting and no universal mail-in ballots. If you had all of those, you would know your results right away.
And
in California, they banned the ID. Right. They have universal mail-in ballots, and by and large, a lot of those ballots that come in are typically Democrat drops. And right now, we're seeing, and news is mixed. We are actually seeing a pretty stable flow of Pratt, Rahman, and Karen Bass. However, this is something that needs to be looked at because it should not take over weeks and weeks and weeks to get this.
And Nithya Rahman is gaining on Pratt every day. Today, she gained 12,000 votes on him. She's now 20,000 votes behind Spencer Pratt. A couple days ago, she was 40,000 votes behind. Do you think that this is a flawed system?
Look, I think that the system is working as it should. We're giving voters as much of an opportunity as we possibly can to make sure that their voices are heard. Again, we've heard from Katie a lot of rhetoric about suggesting that something nefarious is happening, but the reality is that there is no actual evidence of widespread fraud. And in fact, Justin Levitt, who is a professor at Loyola Law School, did a comprehensive study spanning 14 years, studied 1 billion ballots that were cast. They found 31 instances of voter or election fraud. 31 instances out of 1 billion ballots cast. If we look toward a red state, Utah wanted to see how many undocumented immigrants were voting in that state. There's no Democrats to gum up the works in that state. They looked at over 2 million voter registrations. They found one instance of an undocumented immigrant who was on the voter rolls. That person never even voted. So we can hear all the rhetoric in the world from Donald Trump straight on down about how Democrats are doing something nefarious, but not a single Republican can point to a single instance of widespread voter fraud in this country that would in any way change the results of these elections.
Yeah, where is the evidence?
Well, look, the truth has nothing to fear from investigation. So if there isn't fraud, they're not going to manufacture fraud. They're saying if there is something widespread and problematic about the fact that we don't get our vote totals for weeks and weeks and weeks, that there's no voter ID and there's universal mail-in ballots, then and there's nothing that comes up. Wonderful. If there is, and U.S. Attorney Bill O'Reilly has pointed to evidence of, he even brought it up again, where he prosecuted a woman who paid people on Skid Row, was it over at least 20 people, to go cast ballots. Now, listen, 20 people is a lot if you're looking at people spending money to go cast votes for other people, and we don't have control of our voter rolls.
What Bill O'Reilly said last night when he was on live with us was that there are a few instances, but he does not right now have evidence of widespread voter fraud. When President Trump has been pushed, or his attorneys have been pushed in court over the years, they have never been able to provide.
Right, and I think that's the difference.
Evidence.
In court, you're required to tell the truth, but when Donald Trump is out there speaking off the cuff from the Oval Office, that does not stop him at any point from suggesting that there is widespread fraud. And this is something that he's brought up over and over and over again.
But two things can be true. One, it could be that there is not fraud and that they're going through the system the way that the system is designed. But it also could be true that the system needs some reformation. And maybe it isn't a good thing that your ballot can be postmarked on Election Day and can be received 4 days after Election Day. Maybe it isn't a good thing that you can drop off your ballot, vote by mail on the day of the election. Maybe it should be a few days before that. I mean, there are things that other states do that speed up their count. Do you think that's worth the trade-off?
I think it's worth a conversation, but the reality is that it's really important not to conflate the system working as it was intended to work, which is a slow system because we give voters as much time as humanly possible to make sure that their voices are heard. And frankly, I think that's more important than getting it done as quick as possible, because there's no difference really from having an answer yesterday versus tomorrow. I mean, the election results are going to be the election result. And I personally think it's more important to give Americans as much of an opportunity to have their voices heard in these elections as we possibly can.
Do you think, Katie, that some of the president's language on this is irresponsible and creates a distrust in the system and actually hurts Republicans and may stop them from voting?
I absolutely don't. I absolutely agree that this needs to be looked at. Look, I went to go vote.
Looked at by who?
This needs to be looked at and ensured that the system is secure. There's no other country in the world that has this electoral and election system like we have. Everybody knows day of who won, except California, United States, and particularly Los Angeles. And so what is broken with the system, whether it should be same-day voting, whether you should have voter ID, but I don't think it's irresponsible of him. And I think putting a U.S. attorney on it, who's going to do everything by the law and look at it very closely, should say to everyone, it's the same thing with regular fraud. We want this to be blown open. We don't want to cover up fraud because it hurts people. So if there is a broken election system, if we have inactive voters on our voter rolls and somehow those ballots are being cast in their name, even though they've moved to Texas or Florida or any of the other states that people fled to, we want to know about it. And that should be a unified agreement. Like, we don't want voter fraud.
Katie Zachariah followed a familiar MAGA debate strategy here. While Tyler Cohen pointed to studies examining over 1 billion ballots that found virtually no evidence of widespread voter fraud, the response was to cast doubt and create uncertainty rather than address the facts directly. In the rare cases where irregularities were found, they were often mistakes rather than intentional fraud. The bigger issue is access to voting. Bryan argued that taking an extra day or two to count ballots accurately isn't a problem, but many MAGA voices continue pushing for stricter voting rules and limiting voting to a single day. Since U.S. elections are held on Tuesdays, that can make it harder for working people to cast their ballots. Fewer voting opportunities generally mean lower turnout, and that's why these restrictions remain such a controversial topic. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you're enjoying the breakdown, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video so more people can join the conversation.
You don't think you think it's not irresponsible for the president of the United States, the person with the biggest megaphone in pretty much in the world, to say that there is voter fraud happening in California with no evidence to actually back up what he's saying? You don't think that's irresponsible?
I think there's evidence, and I don't think it's irresponsible.
But what evidence do you have?
I've named some, and I'm sure
you said that voter rolls haven't been cleaned up, but that's not the same as widespread voter fraud.
If you are not regulating who's going to the ballot box, you are going to inherently get unfair demographic. Look, Democrats, by and large, surge. Ramon has come up a ton in these last ballot drops.
Because those are mail-in ballots, and those are disproportionately and overwhelmingly used by Democrat voters because Donald Trump.
A lot of Republicans have started.
No. The reality is Donald Trump has denigrated mail-in voting, and so that's why Democrats are more likely to use it than Republicans.
He reversed course, and it's a big part of why he won in 2024 is because he said vote early. I mean, he understood that this was an important.
He still raises questions about mail-in ballots all the time.
He just signed an executive order. He just signed an executive order trying to ban mail-in voting.
And many members of the party are frustrated by that because they have said that it sometimes hurts them.
Until you can pass legislation either on a federal level, which will be the Save America Act, and then you can also add in no paper ballot or only paper ballots, same-day voting, voter ID. Yeah. And you also institute that statewide. You have city councilmen in Los Angeles trying to push for illegal aliens being able to vote in our elections. This has happened in Oakland and in San Francisco with city council meetings. And if you need to prove you are a valid citizen, that is a fundamental part of being in a sovereign country. Yeah. No other country in the world, at least a first world country, doesn't have voter ID.
Again, I brought up the example where Republicans in the fully red state of Utah went over this. They found a single instance of an undocumented immigrant who was registered to vote, and that person never even cast a ballot. So this has been adjudicated.
And in terms of illegal immigrants voting, that is for things like school board elections. It is illegal for them to vote in any federal elections, and certainly for president, just to put that out there.
At today's political climate, facts often end up competing with opinions. In this debate, Bryan came armed with evidence, while Katie Zachariah relied on familiar talking points and skepticism. What do you think? Do you agree with Tyler Cohen? Or do you side with Katie Zachariah's concerns about the voting system? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please like, subscribe, and share the video. It really helps the channel grow.